James Cameron may be the person most identified with the Titanic saga. The Oscar-winning director's iconic film has just been re-released in 3D. He joins us now in Studio 57. Welcome. Great to see you.
Charlie, great to be here. Thanks.
What is this fascination? Do you understand it? Is it part of who you are?
Well, it is now. I mean, I feel very connected to the story now, having dived 33 times to the wreck and explored the interior and so on. And I think Titanic does tend to infect you the more you study it. I always say it's like a fractal, you know, you think you understand it, and then you get closer and you see so much more complexity in the story.
What do you most want to know that you don't know?
I want to know what can't be known, you know, really what happened in the last few minutes, who the heroes were below decks that were fighting to trim the ship and keep it stable instead of rolling over, like the Costa Concordia that we saw flipped over on its side. If that had happened, you know, hundreds more would have been lost.
You have strong opinions about what should happen to the relics?
Yeah, I feel fairly strongly that the wreck itself, the structural part of the wreck, called, you know, the bow section as we call it, should be left alone. Because I think that as a kind of memorial, as a shrine, it's more powerful in the deep sea than it would be kind of hauled up into the sunlight. The artifacts, I think, you know, bring those up. They're just scattered on the mud of the seafloor. Bring those up. It allows people to feel a connection to those human stories. And you see those spectacles sitting there and you think, you know, who was that person? What did they experience? You know, it connects you to history.
Should they be sold, though, if they're brought up?
Well, that's an interesting point. That's where you get into a gray area, because they have to fund these collections somehow. They have to fund traveling them around the world, putting them on display. And I think when you sell them and they go into a private place and they're never seen again, that's where they step over a line.
What was it like? So you've made 33 dives down to Titanic, but that first one, obviously, you can never recreate. What is it like there? Is it serene? Is it haunting?
It's serene. It's interesting. It's a very peaceful place, but it's disturbing too when you think about, when you overlay an image in your mind of what actually happened on that deck. Of course, it happened miles above at the surface, but you know, the first time it really struck me was when we landed and we were having a cup of tea as a break in the middle of the dive, because, you know, Russian sub, you have to have tea. And I was sitting there looking out the porthole, and I realized that that's where the band played. And all of a sudden it hit me. This is really the Titanic. This, you know, all of those stories, it's not just a myth. It's a real event that happened, and that's the first time I really felt so connected to a moment in history.
You now have it in 3D. Do we see anything different? Does it feel different?
Well, the ship still sinks at the end. I haven't changed the cut, you know. I mean, the beauty of the 3D is it allows you to reinvent a movie and bring it back to the big screen, where I think movies should be seen, and yet not change it editorially. So you're not sort of monkeying with or revisiting the film itself.
What is it about you that wanted to go 7 miles to the deepest part of the ocean floor?
Curiosity. Just curious. It's the same thing that drives exploration, that drives all science. People just want to know the answers. And I think for explorers, you want to physically be there and bear witness, you know, and to be that remote from humanity in a place no human eyes had ever seen. You know, I had all my science partners, you know, and we were there to gather samples and all that sort of thing. But I felt like, I'm sure the astronauts must have felt like when they hopped out of the LEM onto the moon. Like, pinch me, am I really here?
What did you see that was so piercing to your memory?
I was struck by the desolation, actually, you know, but I was also struck by the fact that life adapts, even in that most extreme place where the pressure is enough to crush steel or titanium. You still see these little creatures swimming around, these little pale albino amphipods are living down there. And you think, how is this possible?
How many species we don't know?
Well, we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And the scientists are sifting through the data now. I managed to get one sediment sample before my hydraulic system failed, and so they're going through that, and I'm sure they'll find some new species of deep sea bacteria in that, maybe some other animals as well.
Does the bottom of the ocean interest you more than outer space?
I think they're both interesting. I think in terms of what I know, my area of expertise is in the deep ocean. This was my 8th expedition. So I think I have more to offer there. If I went to space, I'd be a tourist or a filmmaker at best, you know. So I'll leave that to others. But I believe strongly in exploration. It's so hard for us to feel that exploration is important when there are so many economic imperatives. But there are always economic imperatives, and we have to explore. It's in our DNA.
The notion of going to the frontier.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last unexplored frontier on planet Earth is down there at the bottom of those deep trenches.
And what might we find?
Well, we're going to find, first of all, the trenches are interesting because there are geophysical processes down there that cause these big tsunamis that are so devastating, like in Japan and in Indonesia. We need to understand what's happening geologically. And we're going to find tons of new species.
Great to see you again.
Well, always a pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. Erica.
Titanic 3D is in theaters now.